Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another segment of the Grassy Knoll. This is a pre-record that will probably air around June 16th, and we have with us Andy Colvin to do, and no matter what you say, and I forgot again, this will be number 9. Believe me, it'll be number 9. But at any rate, Andrew, thank you for coming on with us, and we covered a lot of ground. What exactly do you want to pick up with?
I'm calling this one 8.5.
Fair enough.
Show 8.5.
You win. Okay.
Last one was kind of a question, a couple of questions there that kind of went on.
Okay, fair enough. That's true. Let me ask you something before we begin.
Mm-hmm.
Are there 2 of you?
Are there 2 of me?
Yeah. No.
Well, what do you mean?
No, sometimes I mean, and this is between you and me, and then just kind of an icebreaker, and we'll get on to the serious stuff. There are times I think that you have a left hand that types emails and a right hand that types emails, and the left doesn't know what the right's doing, because sometimes I'm saying, well, did we talk about this? But truthfully, okay, I'm poking fun, but there is nobody who's more befuddled than I, and but I have to say, you know, we've been through a lot of ground over a lot of territory, and I'm only just giving you the business. But I'm glad you're back, because, I mean, this has been a long, strange journey, and it's not quite over yet. And it also involves some other guests that we've had on, which has a nice tie-in, a little bit of a synchronicity. So,
I heard your thing with Go Rightly, and it sounds like you're a bit of a UFO a witness yourself.
All right, now I swore to myself before we agreed to do the next 3 segments, which will probably be the last for some time, and that's on agreement from you because you've got stuff to do, and that's fine. I've always loved the time you've got. But, you and I talked on the side, and, I stated what I found, and, my wife and I saw stuff too. So, I know things go bump in the night. There's no two ways about it. How far I want to take it, or just what exactly is the genesis of it, who knows? But yeah, Go Rightly, as you mentioned, though, also, and you really hit it right on the head, because if you hadn't said it, I would have. He is a California guy. All right, okay. You're not going to indict it any further. But I'm glad to have both of you guys on. I tell you what, it's really been a joy. And there's a lot of information to cover, too. I mean, we can have our laughs and the good things, but also, you guys are both serious about what's going on in our culture and society and our government. So having said that, and let me turn it over to you, because I am very bad, I know, Andrew, when it comes to making you digress, because I'm sitting here like a kid in the front row, with my mouth open. So take it from where you will, and I'm going to let you pretty much go, because in the next 3 hours they're all yours, and I don't want it to detract at all, or dissuade or deflect from where you're going. So take it away, Andrew.
Well, that implies what you're saying implies that I know where I'm going here, and I'm so befuddled as well in a way, because I just have had so many other things going on, especially with this trying to get this book in final order,
mm-hmm.
and editing and so forth. My ability to put it all together, I'm just basically winging it, and I think my approach here is going to be to, not that I'm winging it with my research, because I'm always taking notes. I'm always reading and always taking notes. But the time to put it together while I'm trying to do these other things makes it difficult. But I'll just say that the things I'm reading now, I'm reading the book on Nelson Rockefeller and the Amazon.
Ooh.
Are you familiar with that book?
No, but I like the fact that you're reading it. You know my feelings toward that family.
It's called Nelson's Conquest, of the Amazon.
Oh, would that be the woman he died? No, never mind. Okay.
I think it's called, where, that's how befuddled I am. Oh, here it is. It's, Thy Will Be Done, The Conquest of the Amazon. Nelson Rockefeller and Evangelism in the Age of Oil. I believe someone on your show, one of your other shows, mentioned it.
Really?
Gerard Colby. There's a lot of interesting things in there about Nelson that I want to touch on.
What year is that, by the way? What year was that? Can you find was the first copyright?
Boy, I don't know.
All right, no. Timing is everything, but that's not a big deal.
It looks like that's 70s genre.
Okay.
No. 1995. Oh, 1976, yeah.
And that wasn't a reprint date?
What's that?
That wasn't a reprint date?
It's like there's... Anyway.
Okay. That's interesting, and we can talk about more about that later, but boy, I'd love to get my hands on that baby.
Well, he's the guy that wrote DuPont Behind the Nylon Curtain.
Oh, geez, that's right. The guy that was... Actually, that's the book that got privileged, about which Christina Borgeson writes in her book Into the Buzzsaw, and, I can't remember the gentleman's name. Gary, I think?
Gerard Colby.
Gerard Colby, that's where it is. Okay. And
last night, and I'm just going to go through things that are on this completely messy and scribbled note sheet and do bullet points.
You go, brother.
Start with the last thing that I read last night in this book.
Okay.
Talking about how how the Rockefellers were using the religious groups to basically take over South America. That's sort of what the book's about. But here in this passage, he connects, well, a lot of things. I'll just read it. It says, one Rockefeller associate was a veteran, CIA veteran, William Kittner. Here was the epitome of the intelligence operative, a spook who filtered easily into all social and political levels, moving in and out of a labyrinth of clandestine circles. Kittner owed his rise at the Pentagon to Nelson Rockefeller. First as a member of Nelson's staff, serving as chief aide at the top secret Quantico seminars. So these guys have top secret seminars where they talk about Army policy. The guy, Kittner, worked in the Rockefeller Brothers Fund Special Studies Project, aide to the Joint Chiefs, head of long-range planning for the Army, Foreign Policy Research Institutes, a think tank in Philadelphia, worked in all these places. He began advocating the use of private voluntary organizations, including religious personnel, in Cold War operations. So this is the guy who would have interfaced with the wandering bishops, and also with these missionaries in South America that were basically, helping these teams come in and basically get rid of all the indigenous people, and they did the same thing in Asia.
Andrew, I swore I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to ask you if you can give me a quick capillary comment about what your take is on the wandering bishops, and if it's too long, don't worry about it. But I'm going to probably be led to talk to Peter Levenda again about that because there's something sounding a little bit strange to me. Do you want to make a comment on that? If not, don't worry about it.
Oh, well, again, I don't know nearly as much as he does. He's, that's his thing, and I'm just speculating that, from what I've seen, these groups are, they're manipulated by the right, basically.
Okay.
Conservatives, the neocons, and you see it, with these missionaries. You would have really sincere, honest Christian people helping the natives on one level of this tier.
Mm-hmm.
Top, you have, guys flying arms in on
the other hand,
missionary planes, like Pat Robertson supposedly does.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, we love Pat. We love Pat a lot. Pat's a phony. I'll say it. Pat's a phony.
To make an encapsulated statement, it would be, everyone out there, take back your own personal enlightenment. Don't think that a hierarchy, of a church hierarchy or a corporate hierarchy, is going to be able to
save you.
There's some. I'm not going to say that it's not necessary because they do good work in a lot of areas. Some of these missionary and aid, organizations. But it's just that would just be a little statement. I would, something to keep in the back of your mind.
Okay.
Control of your own enlightenment, and that's kind of what the whole Mothman experience to me means. It's this force that's available to you that, and I'm going to reference this in a minute. The eighth tower, the eighth sphere, it's also called. But there's these levels. You want to be in the. You want to have your energy, so to speak, in the eighth sphere. But my point, I guess, about this Kittner is that you have the Rockefellers directly interfacing with wandering bishops and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have quasi-religious organizations or organizations that are real but yet have embedded levels in them that are doing the wrong thing, so to speak.
Okay.
And but this Kittner guy sounds really, kind of like an early neocon. He's probably an important person in this whole situation we're in now, in terms of the history of it. He argued for the adoption of the counterinsurgency doctrine at all levels of government, military, and civilian. He rejected peaceful coexistence as illusory. Violent coexistence was his reality. He basically only believed that military officers should be in the government. Only the military could provide proper economic development in the third world.
What's Kittner's first name again?
William R. Kittner. And this is a guy, again, who's moving through all levels of DC culture, has these, and I'm sure there's tons of people like this, today. It's probably even worse today, because you have so many more like this.
But also, let me just say this, Andrew, that this is also very reminiscent of an individual by the name of James Bonham, who's probably the forerunner, along with Strauss, of preemptive struggles of the communists are the bad guys, and we ought to be there before it happens. Very interesting you should say that. Again, I said I wouldn't derail you, but I'm going to take a look for Kittner while you speak. But this is reminiscent of some other doctrines, that seem to come in after World War II, to keep the fans and the fires flamed, so that we could never let our guard down and the military-industrial complex could keep on humming.
Yes, and, there's also in the same paragraph, it jumps into how Kittner's militarized development thesis gave a theoretical foundation to the, quote, civic action programs of unconventional warfare previously tested in the Philippines by General Edward Lansdale. Lansdale was the Phoenix assassin leader who had an interest in using, quote, gypsies, and then the gypsies come up in the Mothman lore as the MIBs. Some of the MIBs seem to be gypsies. Some seem to be Greek, or were said to be Greek, which possibly meant that they were Operation Chaos people, which may be the same Lansdale kind of team, or even maybe he was directly involved in that one too, but in Operation Chaos, I imagine he was.
And I also believe that Lansdale was seen as a particular problem for Kennedy in those days.
Yeah, and then you have Lansdale in Asia working with the Lansky mob guys, bringing drugs back. And Lansky, like you mentioned, Ruby had this gambling place in northern Kentucky. Lansky was from there, or had, I think even had a casino there at one time. But I found this in the other book by Piper.
Okay.
Michael Collins Piper.
Funny you mention that.
Piper Collins, however you say it. Ruby and Lansky were partners in a casino called the Colonial Inn. So you have, and Ruby claimed to be injected, with the cancer, and so he's tied of,
right.
This whole bluegrass drug thing that's tied in with Asia, and all the Army guys are trained in Kentucky. So that's the thing, is that every Army guy coming through is going through Kentucky. And I think that's why he has so much of this stuff going on in Kentucky.
Let me stop you right there, Andrew. I'm only going to ask you this. Does Fort Campbell, which is in Kentucky, ever come up in any of these places where there might be some more surreptitious goings on?
Well, I've been keeping an eye on them because they have the helicopters there. That's the big helicopter fleet base.
The big black ones?
The Bell helicopter has a direct line to Fort Campbell. So,
okay.
So, and we've already connected the Bell helicopter through various guys that we've talked about before.
Okay.
I think you had confused Woody Derenberger and Walter Dornberger. Dornberger. There's two guys. They're different guys.
Okay.
Derenberger is the contactee. But it's interesting to have a very similar name, and it sounds like one of them has just been more Americanized than the other.
Yeah.
Like the same name. So they might be related even. I don't know. but General Dornberger in Texas, coming over from the Nazi camp, working at Bell Helicopter, taking over Bell or whatever, being the CEO or whatever. Just as Werner von Braun was CEO of Fairchild, the semiconductor chip maker, who Puharich was getting his chips from. And I'll talk about Puharich a little more here in a minute. But it says here, Nelson Rockefeller was pleased with this reorganization of the Pentagon around counterinsurgency. So, counterinsurgency is code for Phoenix program, basically. You know, that whole idea of just basically killing. It's actually the old assassin method from, 1,000 years ago, where you selectively target and assassinate. And that was one of my bullet points, even.
Imagine that.
Yeah, and the reason I'm interested in that idea is, of course, that Hashishans used mind control too, and that's sort of where the mind control comes from these assassination squads. And in the Orient, they would trick the initiate into believing that they had died and gone to heaven, and they would give them a few weeks of glorious, sumptuous debauchery.
That's right. You took the word right on my mouth. Yep.
And then take it away and say you have to go kill so-and-so. And my point is that the phenomenon seems to do this too. So it's a chicken or egg thing. Where did this idea come from? Did it just come from 1,000 years ago with this Oriental, whatever, I forget the guy's name, Muhammad something. Did it really come from him, or is it just an older, more constant, kind of thing? Because I can tell you from my experience with this that it does with people. It gives them assignments almost. And the lady that investigated the Philadelphia experiment branch off into Allende and Morris K. Jessup. She was led to study Morris K. Jessup by hearing this. Supposedly, Jessup spoke to her from the other side to give her this message, and that brings us to the second reference, which is the Paranoia magazine from spring of 2002, issue 29, article by Andy Lloyd on the Dark Star Nibiru. It's the 10th planet idea, kind of, which we hear lots about. Zachariah Sitchin has talked about a lot.
The old Planet X, yep.
And there's some interesting connections in this article, and I've often felt like that, this whole thing about the large Anunnaki people who founded Sumeria and were flying around, and I've always felt that this was connected to this Mothman phenomenon. And he has a quote in here. He says, he's talking about the Theosophists and how, by the way, the Theosophists are where we get some of the contactee language I was talking about earlier, Blavatsky ideas that the Nazis latched onto. Those are theosophical ideas. And he's talking about the theosophical branch of symbolism. He also talks about the Rosicrucian branch and some of these are basically Western ways of looking at the Mothman phenomenon, which really a lot of people don't know about. But he says that the Theosophists supposedly have an altogether less prosaic system in mind when they try to visualize all this. According to esoteric lore, the eighth sphere, which is this neutral oracle that gives people messages, is, according to esoteric lore, it's a shadowy spiritual plane occupied by beings intent on dragging down degenerate spiritual forms on Earth. It seems that this realm is the one accessed by mediums who erroneously believe they are contacting departing souls. So, even though it raises the question of if you're getting a message from the other side to do something, And they use this in mind control. They use that same pattern in mind control, I believe. But if you're, let's say it's happening in natural life, so to speak, and you're getting it from the psi plasma somehow, you think that you're being given a task of some kind, and oftentimes they will trick the person into believing that they might die if they don't do something. And when I say this person, I mean it could be you when you're driving in your car through Nevada and you see the flashing lights.
Yeah.
The flashing lights can put you in a trance, and you can believe that you received a message. And a lot of people, go through life doing this. They have these great missions that they're on, and in a way, I have to admit that my research on Mothman is like that, and spurred on by that kind of thing. But, the important thing is that we look at our programming, look at our TV program, not just look at our TV programming and our mass media programming, but look at these very subtle kinds of programming, and that's really the key to your own personal enlightenment. But in this statement I just made, I like this. I'm interested in the ambiguity of that middle sentence. It says, the eighth sphere is a shadowy spiritual plane occupied by beings intent on dragging down degenerate spiritual forms on the earth. Now, it could be interpreted as meaning it's bringing down a demonic force, but if you read it another way, it says it's taking down the degenerate spiritual forms. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is exactly the argument that you see in the Mothman world, or in the paranormal world. Are these demonic or are they not? And it comes from, I think, ambiguity, in some of the older texts.
Older texts of what?
The older texts, such as the Hermetic, things from Egypt.
Okay.
That's one of his points in here. Is that all of these systems, they're all interconnecting, but they all kind of come out of the Middle East, and then spread to Europe. But they're all ambiguous in various ways. And for me, kind of, I guess as a photographer, I like to look at all the different pieces and mix and match and try different combinations of what to believe is going on. And it's more interesting that way. And you really do see repetition after repetition of symbols that starts to mean something very deep to you at a level almost, I think, that we're not even conscious. Like, for instance, they have an image in here of the Holy Trinity. It says the pagan god Baal in the middle, B-A-A-L, is, probably the dark star that they're talking about. They're equating this. Basically, what he's doing, Andy Lloyd here, is equating these ancient theories to astronomical events.
Uh-huh.
So they're mirroring each other, so that the idea is that you can go back and if you can look at these older texts, they will tell you things about the astronomical progression, sort of like the Kali Yuga in Hindu, which says that we have a 26,000-year cycle where the the galaxy turns once.
Let me ask you something, if I could. It just came to the top of my head, and address it if you would, and just go back in case, like I said, I'm throwing a boulder in your way. Did you ever encounter any data that stated there were Mothman sightings in and around the Chernobyl disaster?
Oh, yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Supposedly it's not true.
Shall we say it's unconfirmed?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Go on with what you're doing. I'm sorry.
Well, so they have a quote in there from an early initiate of one of the secret schools.
Okay.
Apparently, about a century ago, there were some revelations made because of some arguments that were going on in the secret schools. And it says here, the secrets that were disclosed pertained to a far deeper level of knowledge than has hitherto been made available. In a nutshell, what was made public during this conflict in the schools was the truth that our moon is a sort of counterweight to another sphere, which remains invisible to ordinary vision. And this is, Lloyd is, thinking this is the cool dark star. And this counterweighted sphere is called in esoteric circles, the eighth sphere. So here we have another symbology. Instead of seeing the eighth tower, we imagine an eighth sphere, which is floating out there somewhere, invisible. And it's in another, where did they have it? They had a little explanation of, basically in this eighth sphere, entities live and can come and influence Earth. And it says one of the most resonant of archetypal symbols is that of the lost king, the supernaturally aided, I highlight, the supernaturally aided monarch, who, having completed his task on Earth, does not quite die. And this is very similar to the Garuda. After the Garuda kills the serpent, the serpent doesn't die. You can work either way. There's this constant battle going. It's the yin and the yang.
Uh-huh.
The supernaturally aided monarch retires into some other dimension where he bides his time until the need of his people dictates his return. And that's a messianic thing that's very similar to the Garuda.
Sure.
So, these same ideas are in every culture, I think.
Uh-huh.
Not just the Southeast Asian or the Native American. The European tradition, too, is really, really chock full of Birdman-like symbolism. They have a picture of the triple-headed alchemical dragon Azoth, whose serpentine tails culminate in a strange trinity. And, again, the serpent, the Garuda has the two serpents, has the caduceus-like outstretched arms, symbolic of Christ as well, and even the alchemical entities have the same symbolism from the European tradition or the Egyptian tradition. And it connects to the solar disk, the winged disk that you see on Wing TV when you go to their website.
Their site?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
The solar disk is symbolic of Nibiru, this dark star, as well. The dark star, and in Buddhism, again, above the Buddha, floating in space, you have a halfway visible Garuda. So the Garuda is the dark star, too. He's bridging between dark and light. And in this trinity that they have, these are other interpretations of Christ, or the Godhead prior to Christ. The middle one has the two serpents just like the Garuda, but of course he looks like an Anglo-Saxon warrior or knight or something. But the symbolism is still there, and the same one you find in India and Australia or New Zealand, China.
Well,
it's like every culture has the same, very similar
legends, or would you call them legends? Can you say legends or myths or folklore?
Well, here's a note I made. I'll do something new here. This is a note that wasn't meant to be so much. Well, it's just a little thing I wrote. It says the birds have mastered the ether. They fly around, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's natural to connect a bird with lighter, dense molecules, and taking it further, you can with the supernatural, because if let's say you're just an illiterate person somewhere in the forest, you would see the bird as supernatural because of its ability to do that, to fly. Buddhists feel that objects manifest from this bird-dominated ether. Okay, so the Garuda, again, rules that space where the space is in between points, flying through. And Buddhists feel that this is not just occurring in your brain, in terms of you linking perhaps with a supernatural entity at some time. You see it, you're driving, you see the lights, you maybe see the bird. But they believe that the universe is built from that same process. Okay, so it's kind of the all is one idea that we see the symbolisms coming up because of the underlying reality, not the other way around.
State that one more time for me.
I'm not sure I want to restate that one.
Well, that's pretty heavy.
Well, I talked about it before, the plasma that Puharich studied, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's forming, it's these super small particles that are so small that they're really just mostly empty space, but yet they spin. When they pick up a charge, they spin, and suddenly they create bundles that join together and form material objects.
All right. But let me stop you right there. What would that mean, though? And this is not an easy question. I understand. But if that physical or those physics are true, what would that mean about reality? Is that too general a question, or?
Well, I had here's a nice little thing that where is it? I put it here. I'm editing these little clips that I did. Here's one I said. I was talking about a Scientific American article on holograms.
Uh-huh.
It says this is quantum physics say the entire universe might be a hologram. In fact, they go so far as to say that even though we live in a three-dimensional universe, we actually are experiencing it two-dimensionally. Holograms are essentially two-dimensional, yet give the appearance of three-dimensional. So physics is starting to say that what you're seeing in front of you could be an illusion. Here we see how, let's see. It appears that one's experience, the things that we are perceiving, are on the skin of reality. So you're seeing after the ether has spun and this empty space has coalesced and formed something, it's like you're seeing that. You're seeing the skin of it. You're seeing what light is reflecting off of, but you're not seeing
the reality.
The reality of below it, which is space. And so everything's happening on the skin. And then I made up this joke that, well, not a joke, but I say what's happening inside reality is that there's just a lot more space. It's space that occasionally bubbles up through the skin as a kind of psychic sweat. So when you're driving down the road and you see those lights on the horizon in the desert follow you, and that's like the sweat of the plasma leaking through a pore in the skin of reality.
Okay.
I like that metaphor. I don't know.
All right. No. Well,
throw it in there.
That brings it home to me. So in other words, you're saying, well, of course.
The Buddhists are saying we're made up mostly of empty space. And I go on to write, if you think about how vision works, two-dimensionality is the format. Even though things appear three-dimensional, when I'm photographing, I'm accessing a part of my mind that sees two-dimensionally, because that's how, and that's for photographers, it's a basic kind of a thing you have to learn to do, is to realize that some things that are three-dimensional, that you think are everything, the brain is always going to interpret things two-dimensionally.
That's true. That is true. Okay.
You have to choose your subject matter accordingly, because you may try to bite off more than you can chew and represent something three-dimensionally, and it's just never.
It's not going to make it
work in a two-dimensional format.
But let me stop you there. I got to ask you, because this makes some kind of sense. You said something about the leakage through. Well, I'm going to just term, perhaps corruptively as our world. In other words, as you and I have spoken about, and of course I said this with Adam Gorightly, with those lights, is there a possibility that something tapped into our Earth that I just happened to witness? I know that's pretty pathetic way of positing that statement, but do you know what I'm saying? I mean, did I see something that was a leakage perhaps from another sphere into our own?
Yes.
All right.
Now, at some point, if you're, say, on the path, as they say in Buddhism, you're going to try to start integrating that knowledge so that at some point you stop seeing it the old way. You saw it before. Start to realize that it's just part of our reality, too.
Are you saying that if my mindset had been different, evolved, or whatever, that what I saw might have had a different image or impact on my brain.
Well, probably. I mean, that wasn't my point, but I think.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
True. Yeah. But no, it's just about the process. It's a subjective thing that one of the that you don't want to be. It's just they have different terms for it.
I know, Andrew.
Calling it getting in touch with what's really there. They call it rigpa, which is seeing reality instead of seeing what you've been told is reality, or the story that you made up about reality. And getting back to that idea of always looking at your own programming.
And the only reason I bring that up is because we did talk about what happened to me. You heard me talking to Golightly about, at least the UFO things, and I told you about that other situation, which, I had very taciturn people around me, and were like, well, what's this about? So you wonder how these things occur. And that's the only reason I brought up what I did, and that is one of the explanations might be, and if, again, you're much more adept at this than I, that something from another realm or plane, kind of like slipped into ours, and we just happened to be there to go, oh, what's that? All right, now, I know that's kind of gross, but is that somewhat approximating the right thing here, or what?
I have to confess, I was queuing up my next word point.
No, the thing that struck me about what you have just said to me, and I don't think this is anti-Christian or anything else. We have no idea about what's out there. But the thing is that when I had talked to you about witnessing some of the things I saw, the flashes, you remember, as I said, with Pilot Pete and people who are not fools, we wondered what that was all about. As only an example, along with the sightings that I had, with a friend, with my wife, by myself. And that is just is it possible? You talked again about that leakage, which I think is very interesting. I guess I hung on to that because that somewhat made sense to me. I mean, really went home that we witnessed something from another plane. So help me out with that. Is that possible? I mean, that we witnessed something that wasn't for us to do so?
Well, the other plane is your mind, and that's kind of what I was talking about, is that the shift in point of view is what the Buddhists are after. They're after, and it takes years to do it, but you have to continually use it, and you can use these symbolisms to do it. You can start to see that that anomalous event is within your mind, and your mind is, because of the cyplasma, your mind is the universe. It literally. You know what I mean? Scientifically, not just in a flaky hippie way or whatever.
I got you. So let me ask you this.
Scientifically, the positrons of the universe are passing through your brain, and you are it, and it is you, and
we're all together.
And let's bring in John Lennon.
Yeah, I know. But all right, let me nail you down again, and I'll let you go free, because I mean, this is what we saw, be it the Nevada desert, and we're kind of cutting people out of this because I didn't know. Oh, if they heard Go Rightly, then they know what I said. On the Nevada desert, whether it was behind a house in Teaneck, New Jersey, was that a reality? Was that really a physical reality that others might have seen, or was that just for us?
No, it could have been. Yeah, some of them are. Some of them are going to be seen by other brains, and some aren't. So it's the infinite variety. It's always happening. But there's no doubt that these things can. Their molecules appear to be changing, becoming more dense, and then they go back out again. They come in, their molecules change to allow entry into our dimension, they go back out again.
Does that say anything about the mentality of the people involved, or is it just a happenstance? If you're in that place at that time?
Well,
Go ahead, say it straight.
The selection process, there seems to be a selection process that certain people are going to be more likely to experience that, yes. And, they're often ex-Catholics. Male and...
Well, so far 2 out of 2.
Found out. Keel figured that out once. That they were generally, ex-Catholic guys. But
well, that would fit the bill.
In a crisis of some kind.
Well, we weren't in a crisis, but yeah.
But it doesn't mean that they're not physical. Just because you're particular, and people think that we're all so different. Well, people aren't all that different. There's classes of people. Classes electrochemically. You have classes of people, certain blood types. So there is a possibility that, a number of people could be influenced, yet some would not be, and it's nothing to, think that you're been chosen, which a lot of people do.
No, it's not a status thing. It just happens, right? I mean,
yeah, it just happens, and it's very natural, and it happens to a lot of people. And it's very old. I had this other little note here that I wrote down the other day I want to get to. It's kind of a switch, but it kind of relates to just what we were talking about before. In the city of Copan in Mayan country, there's a temple that I saw in a documentary recently, and it had what they called God issuing from the mouth of a bird with 2 snakes above it. And I saw this, and I'm like, that's the Garuda. There it is. They're literally saying it's God. They're saying that God is issuing from the mouth of the bird. And if you consider in Buddhism, it's kind of the same way. The Garuda isn't necessarily a God as much as he is part of the background format. He's part of the ground on which it's all happening. Enlightenment would be the Buddha, or enlightenment would be Christ, or this particular Mayan god that they had, that was issuing forth from the mouth of the bird. So, in some ways, it's very prosaic and simple. Birds fly, so they symbolize, empty space, and creation comes from empty space. It's almost that simple to me.
Uh-huh.
But again, because of people's brains and how we're all wired so intricately, and the leakage from these pores in the skin of reality, you have all kinds of unusual things happening all the time. Now, how does it come to start to get into politics or into conspiracy? Well, I think it has to do with the intensity of the particular situation, as to whether or not you're going to get a slew of clues from this psi-plasma. You're going to get a lot of clues if the particular situation is dire enough, and that's what these old texts say, that it's about, you're going more likely to see a materialized vision of this bird, in a place, in a situation, in a time, relative to you as a human and your understanding. You'll see it, and it could have a clue. There could be a clue process going on if it's dire enough. And I think it is in terms of this because of something else I read in this book about Rockefeller. A lot of these clues seem to be pointing in that kind of a direction, the military-industrial complex. Rockefeller, if you had to point to a cartel that was really responsible for probably what we're looking at, in terms of destruction of life forms on Earth.
Today,
they're the guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're the guys who are cutting down the rainforest, and I never really knew that until I looked at this book and found out that, they have systematically, are encroaching, buying up huge sections of, the rainforest on the edges, going inward.
Mm-hmm.
And Nelson had, million-acre ranches with 250,000 cattle on them. Did I mention this last time?
No, not that I know you did. Yeah, go ahead.
So, and he was interested in genetically mutating.
Mm-hmm.
So, bingo, cattle mutilation. I'm not saying that's...
They're the ones responsible for what...
Every cattle mutilation is Nelson.
Right.
But that's very suggestive. And, like a lot of things in this story, they seem to be... the perpetrators seem to be mimicking a natural process. And natural process because there are some cattle mutilations that appear to not be related to a helicopter, a guy with $1 billion trying to mutate cows. Some of them are like in the Dyfed Enigma, D-Y-F-E-D, Enigma book by Holliday. He talks about a herd of cattle that kept moving, they were literally locked in. They could not get out. There was no way. And yet every night they would be found, a mile away, wandering. Something was picking these cattle up and moving them. And there was no mutilation, there was no end product or end result. It was just an unusual blip in time-space. So again, even in the cattle mutilations, you have to look at a situation and say, is that the real phenomenon or the fake one? And also in that Dyfed Enigma, they had an interesting thing going on with, there's this big controversy, is the Garuda, or is this phenomenon demonic or not? And to give evidence that it's not, that it's just presenting manifestations, in addition to the cattle moving, you had these scary men in black who looked like the silver-suited, 7-foot-tall jumping jack version. They're called the Spring Heel Jack. It's a version of an MIB that has tremendous leaping ability.
What's an MIB?
I'm sorry?
You mentioned an acronym there. Was it MIB?
Yeah, Men in Black.
Okay. I'm there now. All right.
There appear to be these real, time travelers or something, interdimensional guys that probably aren't faked. And those guys were there, and they were pretty scary for people. Very frightening. That the animals were frightened, very frightened. And any animal that would come into contact with these guys would just be changed for life. It would never recover. So, kind of demonic. Well, also they were seeing the Virgin Mary in the mirror of a cabinet, and thousands of people came to see it, and there were articles written. It's a real thing. It was happening on the same farm. So you have clearly what people would think would be a benevolent Catholic, miracle, along with very scary and destructive, I guess you could say, things. And it's the same phenomenon presenting both.
Mm-hmm.
This Mayan temple, by the way, this is just another one of those little strange coincidences. I happened to study with the lady who broke the code, the Mayan code. Did I mention that?
Nope.
At the University of Texas, Linda Sheely. She's no longer with us, but she was, probably the best teacher I ever had in terms of just pure intellect. And she was nothing more than a painter, a person who painted canvases, who decided to go down to Mexico on a trip, vacation, and ends up, breaking the Mayan code because she had a visual, ability. She had a natural, and I have a term for this. It's like blind. I call it blind learning. They have some people who just have a talent in a certain area, and they're going to, be able to just see things and almost learn without being taught. You know what I mean?
Well, one would think they had a predisposition to do this. And when confronted with the set, whatever it should be, they knew that was theirs, and they could, and they just,
It's related to telepathy too. So, because I've noticed that a lot of the people that have been changed by their experiences, they're also picking things up. It's not, and it appears to be that they are putting things together very originally, in this blind learning kind of way. But maybe they're just, I think
telepathically. Yeah, okay.
People can learn that way. That's my point, I guess, is that you don't have to be taught something. You can be taught how to teach yourself, as they say in the biz, in the education, teach kids how to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes a long way.
But could she have had some kind of precognition or whatever. I mean, that, when she came upon this, it just struck a chord in her.
I wish I had known more
at
the time, and I could have really, asked her about the Garuda or the I guess they call it either the flying panther down there or the Quetzalcoatl.
But Patrick, by by your use of verbiage, am I to suppose that she's no longer with us? Like she's dead?
Yeah, she died, and but I can just say that I had never met someone who had such an open mind before. It was just, and the only thing I can liken it to is that when I was in her presence, I literally could feel it. She had it. She had something, and it was almost a divine presence.
Patrick, what year did that take place in?
86, 87.
And
University of Texas. And it's very similar to Sogyal Rinpoche, a guru that a lot of people have read out there. He has a book called the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. He has that effect too. When I first met him, I was, I tell people I picked up, some kind of transmission. There's a process in Buddhism where you can download enormous amounts of knowledge from a guru in a short time, very short time, like just in, a minute or whatever. And it's called the transmission of, and so they have various teachings, and they'll have a transmission of it, ritual, and this downloading occurs. And this is, I don't know how much this stuff's gotten out, but it's really a pretty amazing process and fascinating. And I'm sure that's why you had so many intelligence guys infiltrating the Buddhist world back in the 60s.
Well, go even beyond that, because obviously Hitler had enlisted a number of them who were found dead upon the Russian invasion into Berlin. That's a known fact that there were, I don't know how many scores of Buddhists that were found there, for whatever reason or another. So if you've not heard that, we'll talk later on about where that's documented. But with all this,
One of Holiday wrote that Difed book.
Okay.
He had this thing about sacrifices, getting back to the burning flesh and how it fuels the spirits. He felt like that that there was something to the whole ancient tradition of sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
It tied into these entities. And Scott Corrales, the Chupacabra researcher, talks about this, that he feels like that these Chupacabra entities are quote, gods of some kind, that in the old days they used to leave out people in the desert. And I guess in Mesoamerica, they sort of a thing, instead of pulling their heart out like the Aztecs supposedly did, they more just put them out in a field
on the fringe of town, let the wolves have at them.
Right, but it wasn't the wolves that got them; it was these entities.
Okay, but this is the same thing we hear from Rome as well. So yes, okay, that resonates.
And it's confusing, and I kind of didn't want to bring it up because it gets some people fired up. Like for instance, when I did a men's retreat with Michael Mead, who's kind of the new Robert Bly, I guess, of the movement. I tried that out. I wanted to see what it's like, and they had an African guy there who had a different relationship to sacrifice than we do. And there were some Catholics in the crowd that got really worked up because this African guy was trying to explain why it was beneficial. He was, and I can't remember how he said it, but it seemed at the time to me to be a very convincing argument that there is a reason for it. And if you're not going to do it in a ritualized manner, it's going to be done in an unritualized manner.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay.
We made a fetish that I can't really talk about it because it's supposed to be secret, but I remember when it was happening, I seemed to know the next steps in the process before they happened. And that was really an experience. I was, he was leading us through the process of what the ritual is to work with this thing, and I was doing them before he, said, okay, the next thing is, I was already doing them.
You already know it, yeah.
And I felt like I was accessing some part of myself that had done this, previous lives or something. But, this, I was going to relate it to, the 9. Okay. Before we move on from this magazine, Lloyd also gets into the 9, and it was interesting to find this and view the 9 from another point of view. I've talked about it before. I'm not sure. I think the better way to say it is the Council of 9.
Okay.
Now, and he says here, guess what? It originated with Blavatsky and the Theosophists. Mm-hmm. It's back to the Nazis, the contactees who were being given these kind of Nazi ideas. The Council of 9 started with the Theosophists, and then Puharich, when he's following Uri Geller around, suddenly starts being talked to by the Council of 9. Mm-hmm. So Geller says, a UFO says we need to drive out to there, let's go. They drive out there, they turn the tape recorder on, a voice starts talking on the tape from supposedly the UFO, saying we are the Council of 9. It's interesting that whole process with Uri Geller was started by a Hindu man named Vinod, or Vinod, I don't know how you pronounce it, but I'll say Vinod. Vinod was a mystic, a Hindu mystic who hooked up with, again, the Bell helicopter guy, Arthur Young, Puharich, and some heavy hitters in the science community, and started them on this path of following this Council of 9. But it was an idea that came from 50 years before.
Okay.
I don't know if they knew that.
Probably not.
But it's carried on into the UFO phenomenon. And Lloyd in here talks about how it's influenced various UFO researchers today. The same, Council of 9 thing is being passed on, and it's being transmuted a little bit here and there. Was there a quote here? Well, it says the message that has been emerging over the last 100 years appears to have been coming from the Council of 9, a shadowy group of spiritual entities who base their personalized archetypal imagery upon the ancient Egyptian gods. The information itself has been derived through channeling and psychic communication of various types. And as I say, sometimes it occurs on tape recorders and things. And then the tape will disappear, supposedly. So, that's where I start to get a little, skeptical. But, you never know.
No, you don't.
What interested me here is the tie-in between the alleged source of the ET revelations and the shadowy realm of the 8th sphere. The question sort of becomes, is the Council of 9 really from the 8th sphere? Is it really the neutral oracle? Or is it one of the lower 7, one of the entities from the lower 7 rungs of the tower? He says, if there's any truth to this kind of psychic communication, it is possible that the Theosophists are describing the Anunnaki from Sumerian story, who in turn are taking on the guise of the Council of 9. And I guess if you know the Anunnaki stories, you know that they're not like all that good. They're bent on enslaving people and making them mine gold and all kinds of strange things. But they are, some people believe that these are the guys that built the pyramids. What does he say here? Are the ancient gods attempting to orchestrate an increasing belief in their own presence within the solar system? In which case, are their intentions malevolent or not? To attempt to access these beings by channeling or other forms of mediumistic communication can only be dangerous and foolhardy. We must find our own way as a race and not succumb to the temptation to seek the answers beyond our natural sphere of understanding. I would agree with this. The Dark Star is a physical entity as I believe it is, then it will be found one day, possibly fairly soon, blah, blah, blah. Now, personally, I kind of think that as we go through this 26,000-year cycle, that we do encounter, perhaps, a particular astrological body only once in that time period. And that would be at the, probably, well, either the bottom or the top of the scale, because apparently every 13,000 years we're at the did I mention this stuff before? We're at the sort of an enlightenment age, and then 13,000 years later we're kind of at the bottom. We're kind of in the Middle Ages. This old Hindu idea that we're constantly cycling through this cycle, and that it only appears to us that we've only been here 4,000 years, but we've been here much, much, much longer. And what happens is the span of time is so great compared to our personal lives that we don't see what's going on. Mm-hmm. And that we are literally having great societies rise up and then decay over and over again.
That's interesting.
And this would fit in with that.
Yeah, it would.
It's just a natural process. Every so often, we're supposedly heading, if you look at us on the Kali Yuga calendar, we are heading out into a new stage. We're still kind of at the bottom, though.
The bottom of what?
Bottom of the scale. In other words, it makes a loop, and we're like the bottom was 4,000 years ago.
All right. In other words, what I'm saying is that if we're at the bottom of something, are we on the verge of climbing out of whatever to ascending to a better time?
Yeah, but it's such a drawn-out time that
we may not see it right now.
See the benefits of it because it's going to take another 10,000 years probably to.
Okay.